Hi guys, welcome to the latest podcast of YarninBlak. Today I've got a really great speaker and a friend coming on called Janine. I'll introduce to you her in a minute, but I just want to acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people. I'm calling in from Baldwin Q, and I'd like to pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that to any other Aboriginal people who are joining us today. And also to Janine. So Janine, hi, how are you?
Good. Hey, AJ. I'm
Cool.
good.
Good, good. So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Can I just also acknowledge that I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and say hello to all the mob online. A little bit about me. I'm a Narrunga Kaurna woman, which means I come from the Yorke Peninsula in South Australia. Um, have a background in nursing, mum of 5 kids. I'm married as well to my husband, Justin Mohamed, that works in the area of Indigenous affairs. And I suppose a little bit about me is I love karaoke and I love museums.
Oh,
I can't
cool.
sing though, AJ.
That's damn, that was the end part of the podcast. I was throwing over you to sing a number for us.
No, 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 no. Or maybe then.
But, but people may know you because you've been on the media quite recently because you are the Victorian Australian of the Year. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that. How was the night? When and how do you feel about winning it?
Oh, how was the night? Well, I think, of course, I was there with you, and you were one of the nominees as well. So it was really lovely that there was a number of Aboriginal people that were nominated. So, Victoria leads again. And so that made a difference. The minute I walked into the room and there were other black faces, I, for one anyway, always levitate towards mob when we're in the room. And so that was fantastic. And then settling into the night, I don't know, I just didn't really think that I would be up there with a chance. So I was pretty shocked. And, that immediate why me ran through your head. But, I think probably in talking to most of the nominees in our category that night, it's, we're humbled, just to be nominated and then to win. Yeah, I was extremely proud, and got to enjoy the night actually. And then the next morning it was up pretty early. So if that's any indication of what it's going to be like up at Canberra next week, it's going to be a pretty full-on week where you don't have time to think too much about what's just happened. You just take the opportunity because you've now got a platform to talk about all of the things that you're passionate, you love, and that are important to not just you, but community.
Yeah. So what's the process from here? Do you know the process from here?
Yeah, so the process from here is next week. We all get to meet at the big house in Canberra. There's a couple of events that are already booked in. I say a couple, but it's something like 8 events that we're booked into. That we get to meet the PM. So thinking about what we're going to say to him. We also get to go to the National Museum, have a night at the museum where we have a panel, speaking to who we are and what we're passionate about. We also get to go to the Governor General. So all of that sort of, opportunity to advocate for our particular fields. And then on the night of the 25th, which is great that the Australia Day Council has changed it to the 25th, we'll get together at a place called the Arboretum in Canberra, Ngunnawal Ngambri country. And that we'll go through all of the categories like we did on our night, AJ. So there's 4 categories leading up to the final category, which will be Australian of the Year. And then the next day is for all of us is the flag raising event, and it's a ceremony for citizenship that we'll be invited to attend. And me, myself personally, after that, I'll be joining my family that live in Canberra and all of my friends there, and I'll be going on a march.
Cool.
um, yeah, yeah. So just a march, speaking to the date of the 26th and how we need to change it. So that's my schedule of events. But I know that if I do win, I'm sure there's going to be lots of conversations that'll be had and opportunities, that I can either accept or not accept, because it is an award. It's not it's not a a position that you take up as such. You know, it's not something that you work every day for. Yeah, it's just an opportunity, and you can say yes or no to whatever comes along.
Yeah, and congratulations, you are a well-deserving person. I people will have some more information about you on the YouTube channel further down, so people can actually see all the things you've actually done. But you graduate after school. Did you do nursing straight away?
Yeah. So I grew up in a little place called Point Pearce Mission, and always thought that I'd just go to the local hospital, train to be a nurse, stay home, look after mob at the local hospital and on community. But this crazy thing happened where we moved towards nursing being in university. So I was amongst one of the first to be in the university intake. So I actually left home when I was 12, got to go to boarding school, which was an experience in itself. And so that was on my father's country in Ghana country. And yeah, so from there, I was first in my family to do year 12, and it was quite daunting, really, age 8, because no one else had done year 12 in the family, and further, no one else had been to university. So it was this really, I'd already gone into this foreign system of boarding school and all that meant, like eating food that we would never eat at our house. Having to dress every day for school, and that was in a very colonial fashion at that stage of my life. And then moving through to university, and yes, I went to University of South Australia and did my nursing degree. Took a couple of years sidetracked to study dentistry, actually, because I thought I might have liked that, but actually came back to my roots, which was nursing, and finished that degree. But yeah, know a little bit about dentistry as well.
That's good, that's good. Did you know that I was a nurse?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did. I did nursing the last year of the hospital system in New South Wales. So
Okay.
1991. No, I did nursing, and I specialised in maternal health and mental health. Yeah,
Yeah, well, you would know that that melding of the two worlds of hospital trained and university trained, and those turbulent years. It's almost like fresh water meeting salt water, and that
yeah,
turbulence and having to do the osmosis. So, but yeah.
yeah. No. Um. So after nursing, what did you do?
So after nursing, I stayed at uni and I did a little bit in academia. So that hence my research background. And from there, I decided to go um, and work with our elders in our Aboriginal home and community care program. So still doing my clinical work as well as academic work, and then moving into working in aged care. Obviously did my graduate nurse program as well. I specialised actually in paediatrics. So did a little bit of research on birthing on country, and my first public speech ever was about birthing on country, and it was up in Darwin. I'll never forget that day. Trauma always sticks in your memory, doesn't it? But from the Aboriginal home care program, I ended up working for our state peak body in Aboriginal Community Controlled Health. So that was ACSA, Aboriginal Health Council SA. Met a beautiful woman there who's one of my lifetime mentors, Mary Buckskin. And she'd worked in Canberra, and she sort of noticed in me this love of workforce and policy and all things systems, and wanting to study more around critical race theory. And so she encouraged me actually to move to Canberra. And I moved to Canberra at the same time that Kevin Rudd was successful into being our Prime Minister, so Kevin '07, and thought I might have gone and worked at Parliament House for Kevin Rudd's administration, but I actually got snapped up by the National Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Org, so NACCHO as it's also known, and worked there for many years. So a lot of my background has been in Aboriginal community control. And from there, I got tapped on the shoulder to be the CEO of the Congress of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Nurses and Midwives. So I think just before I turned 40, so people can probably do some calculations. Just before I turned 40, I became a CEO. And I think in my Australia Day Awards bio, it talks to me being the accidental CEO. And it was very much the case. I wasn't looking to do that. And but when your elders say that it's a good idea, and when people come knocking and there's an absolute need that needs to be filled, I thought I'd give it a try. And loved it for I think 6 years. AJ, I worked at Katzenham and rebuilding the membership base and doing a lot of work in strengthening the administration, and that's of course where I did my work in cultural safety and embedding that into the nursing codes of conduct. A piece of work I'm really proud of, and that work of course then got knowledge translated through APRA and the work that Katzenham and a whole group of Indigenous leaders did this work. We worked with APRA to put cultural safety into national legislation for all registered health professionals. And by the time that work was done, I thought I might have gone back to study. So I followed my husband here to Naarm, and I got a call from a woman that many of your listeners would know. That's Honey Pat Anderson, who said, "I need a CEO just for 3 months." I said, "Oh, I'm about to do an Atlantic Fellowship, but yeah, I'll help you out for 3 months." And 5 years later, I'm still here. Whoops.
So was that the second accidental CEO?
Oh yeah.
So one thing you talk about a lot is racism. And what does racism actually mean to you?
Well, it's really interesting. When I talk about it, I talk about how racism is actually something that we feel, not always something that we name. In my early life anyway, when racism occurred, it was just a feeling of shame and anger all wrapped up into one, and that opportunity to either fight or leave. And it was always something that had ruminating thoughts from me. Unpacking the whole situation of what could I have said, what could I have done differently, and that in itself is when we talk about racism and its effects on health. Obviously, it's those emotions that we're going through, and that releases cortisol, which isn't good for our body, and often many of us are walking around with that hypervigilance, in life. So, but what racism is for me is, those comments like, "Why can't you be more like us?" Non-Indigenous people thinking they know what's best for us, what's the right way to do things. It manifests itself in systems where you see inequity and poor outcomes for us and mob, where you see us not in leadership positions. I talked about the AFL for a long time, where we had this myriad of amazing Black players, and yet we had no coaches that were Indigenous, and we had none of us on the boards of these organisations. So that's that inequity, that power imbalance, that systems that's based on non-Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing, that we have to navigate through. So it systematically locks us out, essentially, and that's systemic racism, of course. And then there's those overt, comments that many of us saw last year at the referendum, time of the referendum, where we saw, Nazi groups, as they called themselves, storming our Premier in South Australia's office, to, those sort of, I suppose, what people call incidental or casual racism, where that you see down the pub, where there's jokes made about Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples. So racism for me, there's looking at it and seeing where we don't exist, where we're locked at. There's the feeling of it, and then of course there's what it produces, which is the poor health outcomes and the inequity that we see in all of the social determinants of health. So and I can never say it in a nutshell.
That's cool. Have you noticed over time industries that are starting to change and get better?
Yeah, I think AJ, like I only reflect back 15 years ago when I was fortunate enough to be around, some pretty powerful tables of people where racism was not mentioned. It was, you might have been able to say discrimination, but that sent people reeling backwards with a real fragility. These days more is known about racism, but we still need to understand it better. And of course, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people should decide, if racism still exists and if we're doing well. And I use an analogy that Greg Phillips gave me, which is, on the topic of sexism, would we ask men if sexism exists, and therefore would we ask them if it was eradicated? No, we would ask women. And so same goes for racism. We have to ask Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples if it exists. And and of course it's the men that have to do the work, and therefore it's the non-Indigenous people that have to do the work in the racism space. Yeah, you see, we've got amazing opportunities now. I mean, reconciliation, for all its, for whatever people think about it, it has, given more responsibilities to corporate Australia, and we see a lot more Indigenous peoples employed, and people are measuring that within their organisations. We see a lot more Indigenous businesses being used thanks to procurement targets within those organisations, and government included in that. So yes, we're on a journey, but me personally, I think there's a lot more to do, and for people to understand, not about Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people, because that's easy to learn about us. It's actually people learning about themselves and their own beliefs, biases, and negative thoughts that run through their minds about us, and therefore the way that affects the way that they treat us. And really critically examining those thoughts, and hopefully learning a new truth.
There's a lot of non-Indigenous people that would stand up and go, look, I'm an ally. Mm-hmm. How do you define what makes a good ally? Besides people just saying one.
I think people that do the work before they call themselves an ally, and I don't think they get to give themselves that title. I think, again, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people decide on that. I think what a good ally looks like for me is different to someone else too. But the work that needs to be done before that, because there's a fine line, I think, between allyship and do-gooders. And do-gooders never did us any good. Back, i.e., missions and stolen generations all come from that. People that thought that they were doing the right thing by us. But it's Indigenous people had led during those times and told their allies what they needed. I think that's the best sort of ally, where Indigenous people are leading, and the allies are opening doors that that Indigenous Australia can't open or don't have access to. That's a great example of allyship. For me, sometimes it's very small. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine, we went to the airport one day. She wasn't stopped for access into Qantas Club, but I was. And I was really questioned about it. And this is a long time ago, before, Qantas had done some pretty good looking at themselves. And so she actually came up to me and she said, I saw that. Would you like me to do something about it? And I said, actually, today, I don't want to do anything about it, because I was tired and I'd already had a pretty full-on day. So she didn't just jump into the space and take over. She actually let me lead. And exactly that day, I didn't need someone to, for want of a better word, make a scene in front of me, and have to hear the denial of my experience. She validated my experience with me, which was really important to me that day. And she let me choose how we were going to deal with that situation. So I think that's just an example of good allyship. But the woman that I was with, and the non-Indigenous woman, has done a lot of work in knowing herself, and her own privilege and power, and how to be an ally.
Now, reconciliation's a big word that gets thrown around a lot. What does reconciliation really mean to you?
I think it's changed, AJ, since last year. I think I feel like reconciliation for me is a little bit empty at the moment. And it's not to say that reconciliation and all the work that's happened in reconciliation didn't help us get at least 40% yes last year, right? But I think for me, I probably am getting to an age where I want to have tough conversations with people and have real truth telling, as opposed to the slowly approach. And slow burn approach. Reconciliation, I know the 5 pillars of reconciliation. My husband was actually the CEO of Reconciliation Australia. My sister Karen Mundine, she's the CEO there now. But for me personally, stepping into any sort of work that coins itself as reconciliation, I don't want to be doing the hard work in those spaces anymore. Yeah. And so reconciliation is new and emerging for me. Before, I had a really solid understanding of what that was, but I think it needs to go through, in our country at least, it needs to go through a rebranding.
I kind of agree with you. Within the last 12 months, reconciliation has really changed focus, and I still think there's some people trying to work within the old reconciliation kind of framework without actually bringing into the 2024 reconciliation concept.
And that's not all orgs, hey, AJ, but I think I'm speaking to the orgs that are fluffy and to a reconciliation action plan, and they get a tick, and they've done their good deed by Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Australia. And that's the easy work. I'm talking about getting down and talking about truth telling in your organisation. I mean, for our profession, for example, putting out a statement about the wrongs of the past of nursing and midwifery and how they were involved, in the removal of our babies, scientific studies on our women, and how that is now going to be a part of the nursing and midwifery course. Those sorts of things that the brave stuff is what I'm interested in, not the fluffy stuff.
Yeah. Look, I was impressed a couple of years ago with the AASW, because I'm also a social worker, was that in their reconciliation action plan, the second sentence was, in order to achieve reconciliation, the association must first acknowledge the past injustices of where social work was historically involved in, which means that if social workers have been working in the areas of health, education, employment, child protection, juvenile justice, family violence, and if we're still way behind in all those areas, as a profession, we have to look and go, are we part of the problem rather than the solution?
Yeah. It's really that institutional gaze back at themselves, and learning a new truth and a new way of doing things so we don't repeat the wrongs of the past. So I hope that answers your question about my feelings on reconciliation.
That was perfect. There's Aboriginal. I'll ask you a different question, but what makes an elder in community?
Well, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach to that. That's for me. Our communities are beautifully.
You haven't got the job description yet.
No, I think our communities are beautifully diverse, and what's interesting and what colonization has done, of course, is that some of us are from different countries. I'm living on Wurundjeri country. I would never think that I would be an elder here, but I haven't done enough time or back home to actually be considered what my what my uncle is, who's only 8 years older than me, a real matriarch of that community, and probably I would say an emerging elder. So yeah, I think eldership, yeah, is different for everyone, and yeah, it's interesting, that process of eldership, but desperately needed in many organisations, that leadership of our elders. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How much Aboriginal perspectives was taught to you while you were at school?
I still remember that, how I learnt about myself and my own culture was in a museum, something that, it wasn't alive, thriving. It was actually something in museums, and it was a lie that was sold to us, right? Like when my mum's an Aboriginal education worker, and she would often have Aboriginal family members, of students come in and say, "Oh, we don't know much about our culture. It's lost." But if it's not lost, it's sleeping, and of course, it's it was stolen. It was never lost. So that in itself, that positionality of what was taught to us, that it was lost as opposed to stolen, and that it's dead as opposed to sleeping. And yeah, for me, if I had believed that, I don't think I would have got through my nursing and midwifery course like I did, which was me constantly looking for, where's the Indigenous content, where's people like Lowitja O'Donoghue and Sally Gould, all of our amazing nursing leaders. Instead, I was learning about Florence Nightingale, who wrote terrible things about Indigenous peoples all around the globe, and I suppose shared propaganda as well all around the globe about what other people had written who were a part of, or who accepted the Darwin theory of evolution. So, that we were at the lowest rung. So it is and remains really important for me that it remains really important for me that we have these Indigenous perspectives and honour our beautiful, rich history in all of our studies, whether it be at school or when we go off to university. Everywhere it should be content, not just for us, non-Indigenous Australia, but for us as well, to be able to see our amazing leaders talked about in a positive light.
Yeah. Now, there's lots of young Aboriginal people who find out or just learn about their Aboriginality, but don't know even where to start. What advice would you give them? Should they start to explore their Aboriginality?
Well, we've had that at the Congress of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Nurses and Midwives when I was there, and it was a really beautiful way of welcoming people that had a devastating history happen to them, and to be able to, I suppose, have an impact in their lives and surround them in a cultural context, but with other Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples as well that were our members, that supported people's journeys, not just when we came together, but offline. So I would recommend, young and old people that are on that journey to become a part of something that's really an opportunity to connect with the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people who have also been through the journey themselves or can assist you on your journey. I think it's always important to know where you come from. If you do know that, of course, not everyone has been able to trace back where their family is from. They've just got a photo or a narrative in their family. But, it always reminds me, I think, when I meet people that haven't grown up in culture, how lucky I am, and how the devastating impacts of colonisation has had on people's lives, what it's stolen from them. And us as Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples that have had that opportunity and that gift, I feel anyway personally that I have an obligation to work with stolen gen, and people who identify that they're on a journey, to help them navigate that and meet them where they're at. Because really, as us as Aboriginal people, that's what equity is about. It's not everyone got to start in the same place, so we can't treat everyone the same. And we're just going to meet people where they're at on their journey, and hopefully, work with them to find the right pathway to learn more about their identity and their culture. And it's not always home on community that they'll find that that hole that's missing from their spirit or from their identity. Sometimes it is in those, formal and informal settings of either a link-up group or, an organisation like Cats and M, where they find their family and they find their identity.
Where do you classify home? I mean, you've been in South Australia, you've been in Canberra, you're now in Naarm. Where do you find home?
Yeah. I know this is going to sound really cheesy, but it's wherever my family is and my husband is now. But where my roots are and where I get refreshed, filled up, or rejuvenated, I suppose is another word, is there's a little place in South Australia. It's a beach that I grew up on, where my nana who raised me used to fish from almost every other day. As a consequence, I no longer eat fish, AJ. I've just had so much of it. But that little place is my special place, my spiritual place. And of course, home will always be, Point Pearce Mission. That's where I'll go home to. Like a lot of Aboriginal people, when my time here is done, I'll go home there.
Now, I know you're really busy and you need to get back to work, but I've got a final question. That is, what would you like people to walk away with today from our yarn?
Look, if I can, I've had a pretty blessed life, eh? And I've got this amazing award bestowed upon me. But I think, for your Indigenous viewers, like, my inspiration really came from, my nana, my community, and I just would love to be an inspiration to other people to sort of say, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Like, you just got to have the love and the passion for whatever it is you want to do in life. I think for your non-Indigenous viewers to think a little bit deeper about deficit discourse, that negative narrative that we all swim in society, that talks to, talks poorly about Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples, to think deeply about that, to think about doing cultural safety training, to learn more, in that process of cultural safety, that is a lifelong journey, to learn more about racism and how to be a good ally. I think that's what I'd love to leave people with, from both sides.
Well, look, now I wanted to say thank you very much for joining us today. It's an honour to get to talk to you more than we could at the Australian Day Awards, like in November. You are an inspiration to so many people. I have a lot of people say to me how much they admire you, and you were one of the people that were most requested for me to have a yarn with from.
Oh, true, deadly.
From the viewers. Yeah. And they go, "Oh my God, do you know her personally?" And I go, "Well, yeah. Oh yeah, I do. So I want to say thank you for joining us. Good luck with the 25th of January ceremony.
Yes.
And I just want to say thanks to our viewers for tuning in. So thanks, Janine, for talking to us today. And hey, guys, I'll see you at the next podcast. Bye.